Welcome to the second episode of my custom card series where we will be discussing Shadow Paladin Witches. We'll be talking about where the deck stands in the meta and how my new custom card support will improve their winning image. Now, if you guys haven't seen my very first video featuring Gancelot, check that out in the link above as well as the link below so you guys are up to date with the timeline of my custom card series, where I am introducing new support per clan every single Monday. Alright you guys, let's get into this. Now, Shadow Paladin Witches is a deck that has not seen much play or any tournament results whatsoever. It has a lot of problems, but also has a lot of good things going for it too. And I think that when creating support for any new archetype or deck, we need to understand the positive and the negatives about it so that we can improve it in the right direction. So I made a list of 3 things that are currently keeping Shadow Paladin Witches viable. And the first thing that makes them viable is the fact that they have access to a new strong defensive unit. Within the latest set of V Premium support, they got access to a card called Witch of Cursed Talisman Etain. Etain has the following effect of, when placed on the Vanguard or Guardian circle, by retiring 2 of your Witch rear guards, you can retire one of your opponent's standing units. Witch of Cursed Talisman Etain is the new card brought out for Shadow Paladin Witches. Having access to a unit that has the ability to retire an opponent's rear guard that is standing is really huge. This type of interference can shut down offensive plays, combos, and potentially their entire turn. That is very huge for a deck like Fianna and Fianna, as this is a late game strategy deck. You don't really start popping off with your card effects until your grade 3 Vanguard comes out. And you don't have any access to good early rush cards, which means that you're waiting to survive up to your own grade 3 turn or until your final grade 3 turn when you have everything set up to essentially win the game. Secondly speaking, this deck's win condition is actually very consistent. Unlike Gancelot, Fianna also has the turning a rearguard into a Vanguard strategy, but the key difference is that she actually searches out the piece needed to make this strategy happen. You don't have to draw into it. As long as you can recycle it and pay the cost of retiring 2 rearguards, which is easy for Shadow Paladin to do, you will always have access to your key strategy of getting 2 Vanguards with 3 drive checks and potentially double critical via Force 2 or card effects. And the third thing, and honestly the most important thing about this deck that it has going for it, is the fact that this is a Shadow Paladin deck. Essentially speaking, to sum everything up, being born into the Shadow Paladin clan is like being born into royalty. You're always going to walk in with great generic support to make any deck that is Shadow Paladin related successful. Now, while Shadow Paladin Witches have all these amazing things going for them via everything we just discussed, the deck does have 3 key weaknesses that are holding it back. And one of the main weaknesses that unfortunately is hurting this deck is, ironically, there's not enough direct witch support. Now, Fianna and Fianna have this very unique strategy of gaining power or effects based off the number of grade 0s your opponent has. And because this strategy is so niche and it's not a regular control strategy, you're going to need specific cards that can actually improve this throughout the match, as you want to gain this power up from Fianna to make your Fianna's attack matter without the needing of a force marker. We recently did just get support with a new witch card, and that is Witch of Precious Stones Dana, who has 2 very powerful effects. It is honestly a 4 staple for witches, but that card alone is not enough. When you have one card that essentially becomes the only reason why your deck is viable, that does hurt your strategy a lot when you consistently cannot see this piece or this piece gets removed. And we want to make sure that we can get more witch support that will actually support the strategy without putting all the pressure on just one card. Another key factor that is hurting this deck, on top of just not having enough direct witch support, is the fact that this deck has low power levels and almost little to no pressure. Besides being a force deck that has access to Force 1 or Force 2, giving you either 10,000 power plus 1 critical, witches themselves do not have any form of push. Fianna, despite giving power if you have the correct setup with those grade 0s, doesn't do anything else. She gives you Fem, she gives you the extra drive check, but that's just not enough. You need the additional power of your force markers or your force 2s or other card effects to make that matter, as this deck is locked into only 3 attacks, so you want all 3 of the attacks that you bring out to count and matter to your opponent, so they start dropping those cards and losing on resources from their hand due to defending against your high powered attacks. This deck unfortunately does not do that. There's not even an early game strategy that even supports this deck, as again, you're relying on the generic support from Shadow Paladin to come in and save you to fill up all the gaps that this deck has. But there just isn't enough good cards for this particular type of strategy that exists to make it work. You need to call out grade 0s, you need to get access to your grade 1s, so you need certain pieces to do that. You need to be able to power up your Vanguards to give them extra strength so that their attacks matter. You need to be able to have the critical pressure in the later games so that those, again, attacks matter. There's just so much in terms of offensive weakness that is holding this deck back from essentially being great due to the lack of early game power and pressure that this deck has, despite it being a late game powerhouse. And for the third and final reasons for witches, and I basically already said it, is the fact that it's very weak in the early game. Your Fianna and Fom do not do anything, and the only time that they ever do anything is if you ride onto them successfully each. If you can go into your grade 1, then it's a Fom, then it's a Fianna. You might be able to get a little bit of a powerhouse play, as Fom has the 2 drive checks that you'll be able to get unless your opponent stops you. And then Fianna just will be giving you the additional Vanguard attack with Fom because she doesn't care about being on grade 2 or 3, depending on whatever your opponent is, for her effect. Despite the strengths and weaknesses of Shadow Paladin Witches, they actually have a solid foundation. Their new support, Dana, gives them great consistency, Etain gives them a strong interactive unit, and Fianna and Fem are a deck that knows what they want to do. You just have to build all the new support around it. And with these new cards making their V Premium debut, I think I've done just that. Making her V Premium debut, we have Witch of Secret Books Audra. She reads, Auto, when this unit is rode upon by a unit with Witch in its card name, draw a card. Auto, Rearguard Circle, when this unit is retired by a card ability, if you have a Vanguard with Witch in its card name, cost. Put this unit into Soul and countercharge 1. Now, for my OG Witch players, you guys know that Witch of Secret Books Audra used to be a grade 2 back in the G era. However, with how influential grade 1 units are in modern day Shadow Paladin, I wanted our resource management card to be a grade 1. That felt like a must to me, and I think that giving Audra the downgrade treatment in this case is fair. Now, Audra is just an overall resource powerhouse card. This card gives you the additional card draw as your first turn grade 1 ride, so therefore setting you up for your grade 2 plays, whatever you decide to do depending on your build. And she's also a resource management piece for your Fianna and Fem. While making support for Shadow Paladin Witches, I wanted Fianna and Fem to still be the winning strategy, so I needed every card that I was designing to revolve around them. And Audra does just that, as Fianna requires a CB to activate her skill and to retire, so Audra will be one of those pieces and get you back your CB, and Fom requires a 1-card Soul Blast to potentially get the extra drive or call out other grade 0s from your opponent's drop zone. Putting herself into the Soul means you have the Counter Blast and Soul Blast always available to you for your Vanguard skills. Making her debut in V Premium as well, we have the Legion mate couple, which is Comet Witch Serva and Witch of Comets MANISA. We'll be starting off with the grade 2 Serva, and this is her effect. Auto, when this unit is placed on Rearguard Circle, if you have a Vanguard with Witch in its card name, cost, Counterblast 1. Choose one of your opponent's open Rearguard Circles. Your opponent reveals 5 cards from the top of his or her deck and chooses a grade 0 card from among them. Call it to that Rearguard Circle and shuffles his or her deck. Continuous Rearguard Circle. During your turn, if your opponent has a grade 0 Rearguard, this unit gets boost and power plus 5,000. Now, Comet Witch Serva, I think personally, is a great piece that fixes all 3 issues with Shadow Paladin Witches. This card will pull out a grade 0 from their deck, potentially, but still at a high chance. She turns herself into a 15k booster, which will turn any column that she's in into a magic number. And with V Premium, that is huge, as you want to be able to get past those 15k and potentially 30k shields in a deck like this, where you only have 3 attacks and you need all of them to matter. Now that Comet Witch Serva has been introduced to us, it's time to introduce her grade 3 leader, which is Witch of Comets MANISA, and her effect. Auto, when this unit is placed on Vanguard Circle or Rearguard Circle, cost. Counterblast 1 and put 2 cards from your drop zone on the bottom of your deck in any order. Search your deck for up to 1 Comet Witch Serva. That and this unit get power plus 5,000 until the end of turn. Continuous Vanguard Circle / Rearguard Circle. During your turn, all of your rearguards with Witch in its card name get power plus 1,000 for each of your opponent's grade 0 rearguards. If this unit is on the Vanguard Circle, they get power plus 3,000 instead of 1,000. Now, when designing Witch of Comets MANISA, I actually had another variation that I will showcase now for this card, but this was the final variation that I decided upon. I think that MANISA being able to give you another body on board for 1 CB while recycling triggers and normal units is actually a really powerful skill. Not only does this card turn itself into an 18k attacker while giving you potentially a 20k booster for any column that it's in, it also gives you the cost for Fianna and Fom, and then you have access to Audra, who will essentially become a refund for MANISA or for Fianna and Fom. All these cards synergize very well together as they're going to set up for your final turn with your witch support cards. Server already pulls out the grade 0 from the deck, so I didn't feel like giving MANISA that sort of skill was needed. I wanted to take care of another issue that the deck has, and one of those issues is without a doubt power and a good first grade 3 turn. Now, V Premium Witches currently rely on the superior ride engine of Phantom Blaster Dragon to get those extra force markers early. And if you're not going that route, you are going the Mordred Phantom route or Luard route to get extra force markers. But the problem with those cards is the fact that while those cards are strong, you then have to change the chemistry of your deck to introduce this weird variation of different hybrid strategies to make this work. I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to do like a strong direct witch strategy while making Fianna and Fom the winning condition, and I feel like MANISA does that. Her ability to give power to your rear guards, 1000 per grade 0 in play, ties into the effect of all the other witch support cards we just showcased, such as Serva, Dana, and Fom. You'll have a rear guard unit or a vanguard unit that can turn all of your columns into really high powered attacking units because of the additional bonus that they get, whether it's on rear guard or vanguard circle. And I think that's very important to add the fact that this effect can stack if you have multiple MANISAs in play. Witch of Secret Books Audra, Comma Witch Serva, and Witch of Comets MANISA, all of these cards in my opinion are great additions to the witch strategy. Audra gives you resource management, Serva turns on your grade 3s and gives you a good booster with high power, and MANISA overall is just a power bonus card that is beneficial to you at any period in the game. All of these new support cards, in my opinion, are really great and a lot of time and effort went into them. But I am curious to hear your guys' thoughts on how we can improve any future witch support. I want to know what you guys think below, as I did have different variations of the cards that I was making that I showcased in this video, so tell me which ones you guys like better. But there's still more to come and you gotta stay tuned for it. Last week we did Royal Paladin, this week we did Shadow Paladin, which means next week we are introducing my Gold Paladin support for Garmor. Stay tuned for that, card fighters, and I'll see you soon. Peace.